This is the All-Star Networking Show with your host, Cathy Paper.
Thank you so much for joining me today on the All-Star Networking Show, Tom. I'm psyched to talk to you about all things networking, connecting, and frankly, you know, what you've done with producing and your career and how we help other people that are speakers. But why don't you let the listeners know who you are and what you're about, and then we'll jump into things.
Sure thing. My name is Tom Cobin, and I am your dynamic coach for public speaking and presentation skills. And that name came to me after, well, literally a half century of public speaking. I started when I was 12 years old, speech class in 7th grade. Thank you to my parents for realizing the importance of public speaking. I won speech contests all over the New York City area, was the valedictorian of my grade school graduating class, went to high school debate, went to college, dropped out of pre-med, and then got back into school for journalism. Top of my class at NYU, was already working at CBS as a writer and producer in New York City. Then after 10 years of doing that, went on air for another 10 years, and then transitioned into pharmaceutical sales, kind of a full circle back into the medical world. And my success was attributed by leadership to the fact that I was a good speaker, a good presenter. My communication skills is what they observed were responsible for my success as a pharmaceutical rep. So even after I got out of the actual field of communication, communication has still been critical to my success. And that's why when I got out of pharmaceutical sales and decided to do something for, as an independent person, I just wanted to help other people accomplish what I have been able to accomplish through improving their communication skills. And I believe that dynamics is critical. If you talk about people that you remember, what they said or how they made you feel or what's they're usually going to be people who were dynamic, who moved you, who moved their speech, who changed things up, kept you guessing. I mean, the brain craves novelty. So if you can keep things novel and exciting and interesting and new and different and changing for your audience, that will make you a dynamic speaker. And that's the kind of coach that I try to be when I'm coaching people to improve their communication skills.
Excellent. Excellent. Okay. So you keep pointing up to your logo of the Dynamic Coach, and I'm not sure if the listeners are going to get the full audio for this. So I'm going to punctuate that point because your gestures are so good. But say more about people. You want people to be dynamic, or how they make you think and feel, and they want to be, did you say entertained, or what was the?
Engaged.
Engaged.
Being entertained is a form of engagement, but simply being curious or intrigued or skeptical. Those are all different forms of engagement. When you connect with what your speaker is saying and you're processing, that means they have engaged you.
Great. So when you were 12 and you first said, okay, I'm doing speaking, and you thank your parents for that, and obviously to be the valedictorian, you're no dummy, right? So how did you first get started speaking? Were you uncomfortable, or was it just a natural thing? Somebody that's listening that maybe goes, well, I don't even know really how to start talking to people, let alone be a speaker. How do I start that journey?
I still remember the clenched throat and the sweaty palms and the perspiration on my forehead and the knot in my stomach and the acid that felt it was going to burn a hole through my gut in anxiety and nervousness getting up in front of people to speak. I can't tell you exactly how I did it, but somehow or other, I pushed through it. Maybe my audiences could tell how nervous I was. I don't know, but I remember how I felt. And I think it's natural. It's inevitable to some extent. Even highly experienced speakers, we still get nervous. We still get anxiety. We just have ways of coping with it. And, those are some of the things that I review with my coaching clients, is the many different mental and physical ways of calming your nerves, because fear of public speaking is a real thing. It's actually a myth that it's our number one fear. It's not. Statistics prove that. That's a commonly held myth from misinterpretation of marketing data from 50 years ago. And I think it's used to hype, like, oh, it's our number one fear, so I'm going to coach you to be better at it. I think that's
I'm more afraid of a lion.
That's exactly. And just a little interesting aside, because I'm so research oriented from having been a journalist in a medical field, I researched fear of public speaking. And I found out that there is an institute at Chapman University dedicated to nothing but the study of the fears of the American public. And the number one fear, since I've been tracking it for 6 years, the number one fear is corrupt government officials. That is what Americans are most afraid of. Public speaking and death, there's this misnomer that we're more afraid of public speaking than death. Jerry Seinfeld makes the joke that that means at a funeral, you'd rather be in the casket than delivering the eulogy. Credit what credit is due, attribution to Jerry Seinfeld.
Yes.
But that is actually not true. They're close. It's fascinating. Fear of public speaking and fear of death are close, but no, I think more scared of dying.
Yes. So what is when you're working with people or when people are thinking about where they have to communicate, there's a big difference between giving a presentation and doing speaking and frankly, networking or meeting somebody for the first time.
Yeah.
Do you have anything that runs through each one of them or?
Absolutely. I remember I was in a very supportive environment when I was invited to join leadership as a national sales trainer at my last pharmaceutical company. And one of the people who I considered a real trusted colleague, I was in my first few months, and I said something to her, and I still remember what she said. She says, well, that depends. Are you speaking or are you facilitating? Oh, wow. Yeah, that's right. It's very different. When you're in front of a group of people, you might be seeking to facilitate a conversation and pulling from them. Whereas if you're a keynote speaker on a stage, the spotlight's on you, that is different. And you'll use different skills and techniques for those different situations. Networking, I think, is a little bit of both. You're trying to present yourself, and I work with people constantly on what is their brand, what is their elevator pitch, what is their 30-second summary, what is their one-line summary, so that you can comfortably and confidently tell people who you are, what you do, and why they should be talking to you. But then there's also the engagement with the other people that you're having a conversation with. And networking is tricky because I think there's a lot of time wasted. I myself have made some changes in how I network, and we can, get into a little bit more of that detail. But I think it's important and instructive for the point you raised that networking and presentation, they're all kind of one and the same. They're just subtly different aspects about how we communicate and connect with others.
And you're obviously a very talented storyteller and helping people do that from your media and production days and then your sales training work is how do people, we could talk about this over and over on several podcasts, but how do you know if your brand is working, your quote, your brand presence, or you say polishing your presence for impact? How do I know if I'm having an impact? I may think, oh, I'm having the greatest day. I'm showing up. Hi, I'm Cathy Paper, telling people. How do I know if my brand's working or not?
It's all about feedback. A networking event that I went to a few weeks ago where I'm chatting with this person, and he looked at me and he looked at my shirt and he said, I remember you. Obviously, he remembered my brand. I've had people tell me that the colors that I've chosen, and I worked with with an artist on what I wanted to convey. The little guy with his arms stretched out, having
Yes.
fun with it, right? So people remember you through your imagery. So I think that's important. And I think I did have a good sense of that from 20 years in TV and helping the graphic artists at CBS design graphics that would convey what I wanted to say in that story. And then a lot of it is really kind of internal definition, who you are. What is it that you want to convey about yourself? How do you let your authenticity come through? And that's that branding part of it. I tell people, when you submit a script to a Hollywood studio for consideration into development into a film, it'll have the title, and a one-sentence summary. So right now, my primary client is a very high-level finance investment capital group called Fund Launch. And I don't think that they're going to mind me mentioning them because any publicity is good publicity, right?
Right.
But Fund Launch has a program where it coaches people to launch investment capital funds seeking hundreds of millions of dollars in some cases, private equity, real estate, gold, commodities, crypto, whatever it is. And I try to tell my clients there, try to drill it down. How, if you're at a networking meeting, well, first of all, there's what kind of networking meeting you're at. Who are you trying to meet? But then when you do shake that hand, exchange business cards, look at your name tag, right? What do you say? Can you sum it up in one succinct sentence? And when you can do that, the rest starts to flow because it's going to track back to your central theme.
Yeah.
So I can say I am a dynamic coach for more effective presentation skills and public speaking. So, and everything else I would do builds on that. Now, there is a technique that's used in sales models where you don't start with your product, you lead to your product. And if you have the chance, this can be a really effective way in networking to engage somebody by not starting with your name, not starting with your brand, not starting with what you do. You start with a statement that might be controversial in some cases. I don't know. But for example, if I were meeting you at a networking event, you ask me, so Tom, what do you do? I might start by saying, well, we all have impact on the world around us through how we communicate. Would you say that's the case? And Warren Buffett says the single most important skill for our success is our communication skills. And that's what I do. I help people like you get what's in here and in here out there. I help you get what's kicking around in your mind and what you feel in your heart out to the world around you. And I do that by helping you become a more effective communicator about whatever your message is, whatever you're offering, whatever the other person's needs are. It's focused on the customer. And that's why if you start with a statement of fact and then you follow up with some gentle, not interrogation, but gentle questioning, you find out what aspect of what you offer is going to solve the need. If I'm a car salesman and I got a Jeep Wrangler in the corner and a two-seat sports car in the other corner, and I'm getting more commission on the Jeep. So I run up to you and I say, well, let's say I get more commission on the convertible, the two-seat convertible. And I run up to you and I say, hey, man, let me tell you about this great convertible. It's got twin overhead cam, rack and pinion steering, race suspensions, blah, 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 blah. If I haven't asked you if you have a family, you're going to turn around and walk out. Because I don't care about your need. I'm concerned about my getting that higher commission. So now I got 100% of nothing. But if I ask you, so is this your wife or are you here? What, do you have kids? Oh, so you need a car with a little more room. Well, let me show you this Jeep Wrangler.
Great.
Now you're more interested. Now you're engaged because I've showed you that I cared about what your needs are. And when we network, I think that's a big part of it, is questioning people. I love this quote. Don't count the people you reach the people who count. And I've had to apply that to my network. I no longer go to just these generic networking meetings because I found that, I don't need a real estate agent or a lawyer or an accountant. No. I want people in this community of, let's say, venture capitalists and high tech who I know need to be presenting their complicated concepts to people who might invest in their companies. So now I know there's already a bought-in need among the people that I might networking with, and that forms the basis for a connection. Otherwise, you just spin your wheels and you waste a lot of time networking.
Well, and two things you said. One is, the people who count, getting very clear of where you're networking and why and who you're connecting with. I think that's really great advice for the listeners. Also, the other thing you did when you introduced yourself, and again, because we're not on camera, I think people missed what you did. You made eye contact. And we were talking about brand, and you made eye contact and you kind of looked over to the right of your screen and said that I want to punctuate that for people because it's not all just the words, right? It's some of how you show up. I mean, I'm assuming that's part of when you
Yeah.
network,
Okay.
because you did it so naturally. I don't even know if you noticed you did it, but I wanted to let the listeners know. I felt like, oh, I really want to meet you through the screen. Like you turned, you smiled. I think you even tilted your head a little bit, you know.
Well, thank you.
So, okay, let's talk about this is great stuff for people, and knowing where they play, or who they need to connect with is great. How do you have a set of questions when you're talking with people? Say you're meeting somebody for the first, not a speaker, but you're going to that event. You're in the right room. You know what you want to say or who you want to connect with about you. How do you engage in dialogue with somebody?
Yeah, that's an interesting point. Now that I think about it, when I was working with a coach for a short time, and I was going to a networking or a business convention at the Miami Airport Convention Center. So you can imagine it's got small little stage areas and then booths and plot places they actually had speed networking. And we were talking in advance about a couple of different phraseology patterns to use as I approached somebody and then to kind of test them, back and forth. What kind of reaction, even paying attention to their visuals and their body language. If I start with this, if I start with that. So yes, there is some rehearsal in advance. I might want to try more of the asking questions first, with one of those techniques. But my tendency is not to ever want to be so cookie cutter, one size fits all programmed. I want to be open. I want to be really engaged and curious in the moment. And actually, I was told when I was a TV reporter, one of the reasons why I got really good stories and sound bites is because I was really paying attention, and then I would ask the question that maybe another reporter didn't ask, and I
Yes.
would get the sound bite that turned out to actually be the big story. But that all comes from just a genuine curiosity and interest in other people. So I try to take that into networking as well and drill down and ask them a little bit deeper when things occur to me that I'm just genuinely curious about. That shows that I have an interest in what they do. And then as they give me more information about what they're interested in and what their needs might be, well, then I can turn around and say, I've actually successfully coached entrepreneurs like you who are trying to raise capital. Or for the most of 2022, I was a career transition consultant. I helped people like you identify their brand and simplify their resumes and know how to show up for an interview and prepare those questions. So, I can help you. So, whatever it is about the individual, that's where my focus is. And I think if we try too hard to come in every time with the same tactic, and we might not know that it's failing. So at least if you're going to do that, I think you have to try a couple of different approaches and pressure test and field test and see which seems to be working better and then evolve over time.
Yeah. Oh, great advice. And again, sometimes I tell people rewind, listen to that again, because I jotted it down of you said engaged and curious in the moment. And, again, as a reporter, for you to ask that next question or to both be a good listener that shows your genuine interest in people, that's a really powerful nugget for people to take away. And it's, presumably why you're so successful at coaching people on how they show up, because there's that balance of reading the room, reading the person, and then you had said earlier in the show, connection between your head and your heart. And you can't script that. That's just,
No, no. I like to say we don't wear our hearts on our sleeves. We wear our hearts on our faces. This is an interesting little scientific nugget. What happens when you smile at a baby? They
it smiles
smile.
back, right?
Right. Before they can talk. Very early in the neurogenesis of the human brain, we developed a specialized set of neurons called mirror neurons. And it's how we recognize facial expressions and instinctively mirror them back. And this is a technique that can be, I don't want to say used because it makes it sound manipulative, but it's a technique that comes into play. As you mirror the other person's facial expressions and tone of voice, you form a connection. So that's something to remember at all times is that you can get clues. Another saying that I have is if you want to read minds, learn to read faces. because facial recognition is a critical part of emotional intelligence, which is how we connect with other people. There's actually a disorder called alexithymia, where people lack the ability to recognize and reciprocate facial expressions. And these people have extreme social adjustment issues. They can't connect with people. They feel like people don't understand them because of the importance of facial recognitions. And in my workshop, I have a whole section, a workshop, and it's a really fun activity to try and recognize other people's facial expressions. You can actually do a quiz online. If you search facial recognition quiz, you'll be able to take the quiz and see how good you are. So that's a really good skill, I think, in the networking situation to read, is somebody looking away? Are they distracted? Are they even listening to you? Are they looking at the next person to networking? When I was just getting out of college, those of us of a certain age will recognize the name Jerry Rubin, along with Abby Hoffman. These were the two hippies who were at the center of all the disruption of the 1968 Democratic National Convention. Over time, Abby Hoffman went hard left, writing a book called Steal This Book, Anti-Establishment. Jerry Rubin sold out, went into corporate, and he used to run networking events at Studio 54 in New York City. And his guidelines were pocket full of business cards, no more than 10 minutes with each person. Get your data, move on to the next. And I think that's the idea of volume. It makes it a numbers game. It's spray and pray. I don't do that. In fact, a guy got in my face last week at a networking event here in Miami, lecturing me on how to network. And he saw that I was spending all my time with this, not all my time, but inordinately long amount of time with one group of people. Well, what he didn't know is that I came away with a pretty firm commitment for a coaching client. Now, am I going to blow that person off in the moment because I'm going to make them feel somebody else is more important? No.
Yeah.
So I think that's another thing to keep in mind when you're networking is people will be reading you as to how genuine your interest is in them. And maybe some guy's trying to sell me on air conditioning, and I don't need an air conditioning. I will very politely say, hey, man, thank you so much. I don't need your services, but give me your card. If I know anyone who does, I'll be happy to connect you. And that way you extricate yourself from an unproductive conversation without being rude. And then, I'll often in networking situations, I'll say, so who are you here to meet? Who would you want to meet? What was your intention? What would be your goal to come away from this networking event? Maybe I can help you. If you haven't hit that person, but I have, I will bring them over to you. And 10 minutes after I told somebody I would do that, I did that.
Yes.
So, and then somebody else did the same thing for me. So,
and those are, sorry to interrupt you, but those are not small takeaways. So again, for anybody listening, what you just said, people will be reading you. And then when you offer to introduce somebody at an event or say you should meet this person, and then you actually do it, that shows the follow through. That shows the integrity. That says, hey, you're a person I want to do business with. Or people make, such impressions. I think facial recognition is one, but I also know people watch people's behavior, especially at networking events, and they want to see, are you who you say you're going to be? Or do you say, excuse me, I need to go talk to so-and-so? So
right.
Really great tips.
That it matters. And then over time, if you're in a community, I find often here in Miami, I'm sure it's the same thing everywhere. There is a community of people who tend to go to the same networking events. I was invited to this last one by somebody who organized and said, there's two people I want you to meet. And it turned out one of them, I already know Carrie from another networking group, but that's the courtesy. That's the care. We want to help each other. We want to support each other. And I think if you come into a networking event with just as much focus on what you can give as what you want to get, it pays off over time. People will remember you. People will try to, help you out once you have shown that you're willing to help them.
This is great. This is great. So before we wrap up, any last tips to share with people? We'll put in the show notes where they find you and how they get connected. But any last tips? Because this has been really helpful. I'm loving the data. I love the tips on it, and I'm so glad we connected through the National Speakers Association.
Right. Yeah. What an incredibly supportive group. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, there was one thought that I had before that I didn't get to say, but I always challenge myself from the days I was a TV producer in New York to a reporter, and even now, 3 questions in terms of what you want to say. So what? Who cares? What difference does that make? So what is generally, why do you want to say this? Why do you want to take up somebody else's time? Who cares? That's your target audience. Some people will care, some people won't. So if you ask yourself, who cares? You're identifying your target audience. And then the big one, what difference does that make? We are looking for impact. And there's only 3 kinds of impact that you can have on others. You change what they think, that's cognitive. You change how they feel, that's emotional. But ultimately, the holy grail is behavioral. You change how they act. You change what they do. And as a national sales trainer, every one of my workshops had to start with the learning objective. After this workshop, participants will, and we would be spanked if we said they will understand or realize or whatever. No, what's the behavioral change? After this workshop, representatives will more effectively convince doctors to write their product. What's the behavioral impact? So I think, again, if you talk about your brand and what you want to convey, if you keep those 3 questions in mind, even in terms of what stories you want to tell, what's the point of telling this story? So what? Who cares? What difference will that make? I think those 3 questions guide effective communication and help us stay focused on achieving our goals.
No, excellent. Really excellent. Thank you so much for being here today, Tom. It was so great to get to know you, and this was awesome and helpful, so helpful for the listeners.
No, I'm so honored and humbled that you invited me on, thinking that what I might have to say would be helpful to your audience. And I do hope that everyone out there gets at least one nugget that they can implement and do something differently based on what they've heard today.
Thanks for listening to the All-Star Networking Show with Cathy Paper. If you're interested in being a guest, please contact Cathy at www.rockpaperstar.com.